Good afternoon. I would like to welcome everybody who joined Ukrinform media. I am very glad to welcome you here on behalf of the whole media center team. I just wanted to welcome you one more time. And we are independent team. We are supporting initiatives, all the initiatives aimed at capacity building and development of our country, and we understand European integration subject matter is very important subject matter, and we are very glad that we are discussing it here. And I would like to wish you a fruitful discussion, and I would like to introduce our moderator, Victoria Melnik. She is project head of Center of Legal Reforms and Political Reforms. Thank you very much. I would like to welcome everybody and people who are watching online. And we are discussing extremely important topic, capacity of our government when we are talking about European integration. And we are organizing it in cooperation with UNSTO Center and Political and Legal Reforms, Euroscope, with MATRA support, and Kingdom of Netherlands Embassy. And we are just welcoming His Excellency Jens de Mol. And please, floor is yours, Your Excellency. First of all, I just wanted to say that I'm extremely glad to be here. And to me, it's extremely nice experience. First time here. With your permission, I'll continue in English. It will be better. It's easier for me.
I'm very happy to be here. And I would like to thank the organizers, of course, our partners ANS, the Center of Policy and Legal Reform within the Euroscope project. It is a MATRA funding grantee, a project that analyzes Ukraine's movement towards EU memberships. And it gives citizens a better understanding of why Ukraine's accession to the European Union and to monitor all the different steps that will need to be taken as part of this. And let me start, first of all, by expressing my sincere, really sincere admiration and appreciation for Ukraine's achievements in its endeavor to become a member of the European Union. And with 20 months of heroic resistance of the Ukrainian people to the full-scale military aggression of the Russian Federation, Ukraine has made a very significant progress on the path towards EU integration. And you all play an important role in this, I know from first hand. Progress in political and legal harmonization is obvious. And Ukraine has taken significant steps to bring its legislation and institutions in line with the EU norms and standards. And this includes the adoption of reforms in the field of rule of law, the fight against corruption, and protection of human rights. At the same time, we will have to see how all of this, these new laws will be implemented in practice. Putting legislation in place is not the same as actually transforming things. It will take time. And there's this saying, the proof of the pudding is in the eating. So we will have to wait and see what comes out of this. A lot of work is still to come. And we're still only at the beginning of the process. On the 8th of November, the European Commission will publish its report with findings on Ukraine's progress on the 7 so-called recommendations. And then at the December meeting of the European Council, member states will actually decide on the opening of accession negotiations. And negotiations that actually can take quite a number of years to be completed, which we have to keep in mind. And we should all be honest about this to avoid frustrations at a later stage. In Ukraine, politicians should present a realistic picture about this to their fellow countrymen and women. It's not going to be settled in 2 years' time, as we've heard recently a couple of times. Also because internally in the EU, we will have to do a lot of homework. still to be ready to accept Ukraine into the Union, which would then be, let's be honest, one of the bigger member states. And this will have huge consequences for our internal decision-making, but also for the spending from the EU budget. It will take time to think this through and implement the changes that are needed. And this is a process which is just beginning. At the same time, the EU integration project is never finished. There will be many changes in the future with which all member states and candidate member states like Ukraine will have to adapt to. And we should all be aware of this as we discuss the accession process. The Dutch government is strict, fair and engaged regarding EU enlargement. The accession process needs to be merit-based, which is why we welcome and appreciate the impressive energy with which the Ukrainian authorities have been working on the 7 steps. And here I should add as well, it's not only the Ukrainian authorities, but also civil society, which plays an enormous role here. And I have some of them here around me. We also try to complement this where we can, by supporting projects like these and by providing technical assistance by, for example, organizing trainings for Ukrainian civil servants and receiving people in the Netherlands as well. The accession process involves a lot of detailed work. Lots of expertise, knowledge and understanding is needed, and we will have to continue to look for ways in which we can provide assistance in this regard, also in our reconstruction efforts. And indeed, an important component of a successful integration process for Ukraine is the building of both institutional and resource capacity to carry out an effective process of post-war reconstruction. The EU will support Ukraine in its effort through capacity building programs, by providing technical assistance and by supporting the decentralization, accountability and transparency agendas, which are basically crucial for trust in Ukrainian institutions. And I would like to emphasize here separately that this principle of multi-level governance is an important element of European values and principles. And the EU will continue to support the development of this principle in Ukraine, as it contributes to effective, democratic and accountable governance. It can also help to improve governance efficiency, raise the level of democracy and accountability, and promote cooperation between different regions and communities of Ukraine. And that is why the development of multi-level governance is an important condition for Ukraine's accession to the EU. The fact that Ukraine was able to achieve such significant success in European integration under conditions of war in Ukraine is especially impressive, really impressive. This is an evidence of the unbreakable devotion of the Ukrainian people to European values and aspirations for freedom and democracy. And I would like to seize this opportunity to reiterate our deep respect and support to the Ukrainian people in the desire for European integration. And I am sure that Ukraine will continue to move forward in this direction. And the Netherlands will be side to side with Ukraine for as long as it takes in a very pragmatic way. Thank you.
Дякуємо величезно за надзвичайно.
Thank you very much for such an inspirational talk that have started this event, and thank you very much for all your regular support. We appreciate it very much. I just wanted to give the floor Ihor Koliushko Center. He's going to be online. Good afternoon. Do you copy? Can you hear me? Yeah, I can see myself on your screen. And basically, I am pretty glad to utilize this opportunity. I am in different city right now. I am happy to join you in this event because I think that the issue that is part of our agenda, that's extremely important and topical issue. And from one side, Some people may think that during the war, when they have full-scale invasion and other issues are not topical ones. But I think it's a pretty simplified approach. Sometimes we can get this kind of message and understanding in certain communities, public communities, and definitely we are supporting our military, and thanks to them we are able and we are independent country thanks to them, and we have potential to develop. But at the same time, our successful future depends not only how successful we are in our military operations, but that's not enough. That's very important, but not enough. In case we want to implement our dreams, we were getting independence more than 30 years ago, and now we are fighting for, our Ukrainian people are fighting for the independence in the bloody fights. And we need to remember at the same time, we have to work hard, not only from military standpoint, but government have to be very active, and our economy have to be developing, and our civil society have to be helping our government to implement European integration tasks and helping government. And only in case we are working in a holistic, comprehensive way, and together with our victories on the front line, we will accomplish our objectives when we are talking about European integration and developing our society in Ukraine. And Center of Political and Legal Reforms, it's an analytical center that have been established almost 27 years ago, and for years we were engaged in institutional capacity building in Ukraine. First of all, when we are talking about constitutional system, judiciary, justice, and all the issues related. And when we are talking about European integration of Ukraine and about transformation of Ukraine in compliance with the EU standards, with EU acquis communautaire, and this is the very topical, the most important issues, and developing our reforms, successes in the reforms, but still we have to do even more, and that's our top priority now. On behalf of the Center of Political and Legal Reforms, I would like to thank very much our partners. I would like to thank very much the Netherlands, the Kingdom of Netherlands, and in supporting this event as well, and together joining our efforts and engage in civil society and government in Ukraine, and hopefully with the successes of our military we'll accomplish all our objectives related to our independence and European integration. Thank you very much, and I would like to wish you fruitful discussion. Thank you, Igor Borisovich. I am pretty sure we'll accomplish all our objectives and we are going to overcome. And I'd like to give the floor to the aunt, Representative Hanna Hopko. Thank you very much. It's good that we have such a discussion here, because European integration, and everybody looks optimistic after the 7 criteria, 7 steps, and Your Excellency Ambassador have we are still optimistic. We are expecting that we can start negotiations, but surprises can happen, like Hungary or something like that can happen. And I hope that I would like to thank very much MATRA program and Dutch government for supporting our project Euroscope, and that's an excellent opportunity. In addition to being part of the coalition that was engaged in monitoring and preparing kind of checklist how government implements this 7 criteria, and as well we are preparing young people. There will be a visit to Brussels. 140 people applied. It was hard to select 15 candidates to get to know European institutions, activities of European Parliament, and for local government people, we were organizing a visit to Netherlands, meeting with the mayor of The Hague and Rotterdam mayor as well. And Netherlands have provided lots of input to support communities, to support young people, and in Netherlands they are serious about strengthening cooperation. And about the subject matter of our discussion, when we are talking about future steps after starting negotiations, European integration will be not a nice slogan or selfie with reps from EU and governments that are supporting. It's going to be extremely sophisticated work to be done. When we are talking about Copenhagen criteria and EU requirements to make sure that we have rule of law, democracy, compliance with human rights, economic criteria have to be complied with, and membership criteria, taking all the obligations for purposes of being the member of, and there are 35 chapters of Acquis Communautaire, and accordingly we are talking about 29,000 acts of European law, and Ukraine have to implement all that. And negotiation part about Ukraine accession regulates 128 spheres of policies, and 86 governmental bodies are going to be engaged in all this process. So you understand that European integration and EU accession, it's kind of creating a national team, and a lot of work are going to be done behind the scenes. And it's very important. And Your Excellency Ambassador, you mentioned it's not easy. Ukraine is a pretty big country, and lots of issues when we're talking about economic problems. There will be competition with many European countries, and we need European discussion to make sure that when Ukraine will be ready, but EU won't be ready to have Ukraine as a member. And I think our cooperation needs this honest cooperation. And we are talking about personnel criteria. Do we have enough experts with necessary competencies, with the proper knowledge of English, that they can be engaged in the processes? Because according to the analytical center's data, 3,300 public servants will be engaged in this. Do they really speak English? Do they understand European integration? And within MATRA project, we have developed the online course on Prometheus, and more than 1,000 participants have received their certificates, and the experts and NGOs, and we are engaged in lots of efforts to make sure that we are training a lot of experts to make sure that they can help to Ukraine to join EU. It will be a routine hard work and intensive work, and because of Russian aggression, and basically Russia is engaged in genocide against Ukraine, and lots of Ukrainians are abroad now. Lots of them are pretty qualified people, and same happened with anti-corruption, for example, bodies. Lots of them joined our military, and they are protecting our country from Russians. And we have to utilize all the efforts and to return back our specialists and experts from abroad. And I would like to thank very much Dutch government. And during the Warsaw Forum, we had a breakfast meeting with the Minister of Defense of Netherlands. She's a lady, and she is very much respected. And because Netherlands have introduced lots of efforts to train our military, and Netherlands are leaders in F-16 project, and we have to protect our skies, and we are training our young people in EU. So we have to win the war, and at the same time we have to train negotiation team and those who will develop directives and regulations, bylaws. I'm not going to say it will be in 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, whatever. But the quality of work, when we'll see the laws adopted, I would like to call Verkhovna Rada, Parliament of Ukraine, and there is European Integration, Parliament Committee, and there are respective bodies in the government, and Center Nova Europa, New Europe. And we are trying to select our national team to make sure that we can develop effective and efficient implementation plan. I would like to thank very much Embassy of the Netherlands. Thank you very much, MATRA program. And this developing our personnel is a big challenge. We have to be serious about it, and we need to make sure that we can pick the necessary personnel, and this personnel, our cadre, will be able to protect our interest, including EU accession. Thank you, Hanna. And we are starting now our discussion, and Hleb Vyshlinskyi, Executive Director of the Economic Strategy Center, he will join us online. Sorry that I am not able to be personally in your place, but I just wanted to draw attention, whatever Hanna have mentioned, lack of qualified personnel for purposes of European integration process. When we are talking about top figures, top political figures, and top civil servants, if you compare a situation, what happened 5-7 years ago, it was a general understanding that Ukraine will need to develop the team of top quality Ukrainian civil servants that will cooperate with EU people and experts in reforms, and accordingly these people were paid more or less decent pay in comparison with private sector, and in many ministries these people are still working. But this project ended, and in some ministries people are paid some decent pay. In other ministries, most of the people quitted the job and nobody paid them some additional pay. and situation with COVID, and then full-fledged invasion of Ukraine. There was a general understanding that civil servants should not be paid any substantial wages and salaries. So kind of civil servant activity is kind of a volunteer activity, and to be paid like not to die from famine, and that's it. And starting with, I don't remember really how many years, level of pay have not been increased for MPs, for ministers, deputy ministers, and 2022-2023, despite high inflation, civil servants' pay was stable. Only next year, in accordance with the next year's budget, in compliance with the draft law that is now reviewed in the parliament, number 822, to increase pay to civil servants when many people quitting the job and move to the West, move abroad, and so substantial number of women have moved abroad, and because of the occupation we have lost substantial human resource, and now they are trying to exhaust us in war. And you can say whatever you want, but people are comparing pay in the government sector and private sector. And especially women who are working abroad, and this creates not a very positive environment for all the work that Ukraine have to do to comply with all the necessary EU requirements. So it's necessary to move really fast to make sure that we can be successful in EU accession. So that's a pretty big threat, a lack of personnel, I mean. So, and we need political will, and there is a plan, EU plan, 50 billion support plan for Ukraine. And we need political will to make sure that civil servants are paid somewhat closer to the level of private sector, and to make sure that during the war Ukraine can survive. And we are talking about not a substantial number of employees. Probably about 1,000 people max will be engaged in this process. So I think that Ukraine and our partners can invest into this. Thank you. Thank you very much. As a moderator, I am going to continue a little bit because I am also dealing with the issues of governance, and I think just actually government is really responsible for negotiations and for approximation of our legislation to EU acquis communautaire, and it affects the quality of European integration. As you know, in 2016, we engaged in public governance reform. In 21, we adopted the new strategy, but we understand that February 24th last year, our priorities are different, and nothing happened in this respect. But before potential opening of our negotiations to the reform of public governance is very topical right now. And this is due to capacities of our government, and we understand the ministry and government, and that they need to develop synergy of different bodies to make sure they are on the same page. And one more important aspect, that fundamental reforms cluster incorporates not only negotiation chapters, but Copenhagen criteria as well, that incorporates public governance reform. And that's a framework requirement and criteria that will help EU to assess readiness of Ukraine to join the EU. The existing public governance strategy is not really clear about developing and analyzing policies, and this causes chaotic changes and chaotic decision making. Still, Parliament draft laws are not that effective and efficient. That makes our public governance not that effective and efficient. So that's why we need to establish effective and efficient system to analyze our policies. Recently, the law on drafting law activity. But unfortunately, there were lots of unclear issues in this draft. And we need to pay attention to the following aspects. We need to envisage concrete and specific tasks and the objective of our reform to develop effective and efficient system when we are talking about developing and forming government policies. And we need to envisage the interaction of officials, public, administrative and political officials. All the institutions have to communicate all the time, and they should be online. And this system will help to coordinate and adopt decisions as fast as possible. And as well, strategic planning and drafting policy documents have to be straightforward. And we need to specify different types of policy documents in accordance with the stages of policy developments. And as well, functioning of directorates have to be supported. These directorates have to be the centers of policy analysis and interact. When we are talking about European integration, definitely they have to be in touch with the government, and they have to deal with approximation and European integration. And definitely we need to update and improve our legislation when talking about decision making and policies in general, and this kind of decision just can be successful if we adopt the law on public consultations. When we are talking about national directorates and experts dealing with reforms, this process is not moving very much. By the end of the year, directorates were not developed. In some offices, they were introduced, but not dealing with concrete and specific tasks. At this stage, only in 4 ministries, there are kind of directorates there. But pretty often, personnel level is not that high, pretty low. So we have disbalances. In some ministries there are directorates, some ministries they don't have any directorates. So they need to have units that will deal with European integration and policy development. And this situation is threatening really for our capacity to have the negotiation teams about dealing with different sections of acquis communautaire. And we need to have responsibility for certain sections that ministry is responsible. And introducing and establishing such directorates will help to approximate our legislation to EU acquis communautaire. And then one more thing, qualification of civil servants is a separate issue. And how really they understand what kind of tasks they have to deal with. In May 23, we surveyed civil servants and provided a report about their capacities in implementing EU legislation. And when we are talking about, well, in 18 of the bodies, such units are not established. Even civil servants that are not aware that they are responsible for certain part of the legislation. And a couple of ministries are trying to take responsibility for some section of the legislation, and we need to clearly establish the authorities of different agencies. And when we are talking about legislation, what we are saying that the results of the survey are due to a lack of clear structuring and analysis and policy development. And as well, there is a need to upgrade qualification of civil servants. To my mind, what we need to engage in comprehensive systematic approach, because integration will take years. As all speakers have mentioned, we understand it will take years. And we have to be ready for this future, and we need to upgrade the level of our degree education, to develop curriculum in our universities, and we need to engage in upgrading skills of our civil servants. So programs on upgrading skills of civil servants have to incorporate general issues dealing with European integration, but as well we need to deal with sectoral programs that will deal with certain acquis communautaire and approximation of Ukrainian legislation to acquis communautaire, and about communicating about European integration process. That's a very important aspect. It should be honest and transparent at all levels. Some candidate countries are facing the problem that just their citizens, they have less and less confidence when they are talking about negotiations with the EU. We need to communicate to our people that it won't happen immediately, and to provide our people just realistic picture and not to try to impress them with some dreams. It should be in a comprehensive way. Our civil society is very active and they are ready to provide their expert knowledge. I think this civil society is exceptional in Ukraine. But because in the ministries there is a lack of certain divisions and departments, we are not always able to find partners to share whatever we have developed. So government have to engage in interaction with civil society, and we need to have clear communication with all the stakeholders. And when we're talking about international partners, civil society, in case government will engage in this type of dialogue before negotiations, during negotiations, we'll be able to coordinate pretty quickly and to develop joint vision of European integration and our future. Thank you. So now I'm back to my moderator role. And now I just wanted to give the floor Alona Hetmanchuk, the founder and director of Nova Europa Center. Thank you very much for inviting me here, for organizing this discussion. Thank you very much, the Embassy of Netherlands. And this discussion is only the beginning of such type of discussions, because unfortunately we won't be able to discuss it all today, but I'll respond to some of the issues that have been mentioned, not to repeat too much. Our analytical center, Nova Europa, New Europe, we are trying to make sure that Ukraine have to be better prepared to negotiations, and as well we are participants in coalition on monitoring all these 7 recommendations, but we're trying to study Western Balkan experience because they engage in negotiation process, and as well experience of Central European countries, to make sure that we can prepare better to accession negotiations, entry negotiations. And we just wanted to underline that we need to be prepared in advance to this. And we prepared our study with the necessary recommendations. It is in English and Ukrainian, and getting ready to negotiations with the EU, experience of Central Europe and Western Balkans. And a lot of discussions were around institutional capacity building, who have to be engaged in the negotiations process. With your permission, I'll share our observations. We visited 3 Western Balkan. We met people who negotiated these issues, and we organized in-depth interview with Central European countries, in Czech Republic, Poland, and Latvia. And some conclusions that I have made. We understand pretty well that joining EU, it's a political and technical issue, even geopolitical and technical issue when we're talking about Ukraine. Starting with our application, the membership, and this is the process of geopolitical expansion. We are not in the phase of this process, negotiations. It should be merit-based process, and we wish it. But we are not there yet. But we have to be prepared. And because we understand, while we have the active phase of war, geopolitical expansion becomes a trendsetter even in the most skeptical countries in EU about EU expansion. But at the phase of ending the war, we are facing the risk that we will face a very technically oriented process. And we will need entirely different approaches. And in the EU countries, especially those who joined EU starting 2004, and negotiations about EU accession are not really negotiations. From traditional standpoint, I can see that Your Excellency Ambassador, you are smiling, but that's basically transposition of acquis communautaire in the respective countries. What you are talking about? You are talking about transition period, and you negotiate about certain wordings, certain exceptions, certain peculiarities, certain specifics. But my personal observation and my personal forecast, I enjoy forecasting things. So in case of Ukraine, it can develop into real negotiations. It's not only about the size of Ukraine. After Poland, we are probably the largest territory that will join EU, and it will be after the war. There will be a need to rebuild the country, and probably will start negotiations during the war. And it's pretty obvious that Ukrainian negotiation team will try to explain the situation. And as well, we have pretty well developed, but unfortunately just pretty we have damaged but still competitive agricultural sector. There will be lots of discussions about it, and we know the latest situations when we are talking about exporting our grain to Poland and how it may look like. And all these factors will cause the situation that it won't be like technical implementation, but real negotiations with Ukraine. And one more thing about negotiation process. These are never-standing efforts to show that Ukraine have democratic institutions, and we need to have full-fledged efforts, not only implementing 7 recommendations and expecting that they will believe us that it will work here. We have to prove all the time, not only by our laws, but how it really is implemented into real life. And EU accession is also a process of country creation and experience of other countries, including the Western Balkans. So it is ideal to have the situation and to be like Austria or Sweden when they had democratic institutions and market economy. But unfortunately, we are not Austria and we are not Sweden. We have to be objective about it. One more stage, the structure of negotiation process and the whole infrastructure of negotiation process. I don't know personally, but there were discussions at the end of the last year, beginning of this year. This ministry or that ministry have to be a leading line ministry, and still we have to choose the right model. It should be office or bureau under the cabinet of ministers, under the prime minister, or it should be Ministry of Foreign Affairs. There are different models. There are no just one recipe for all. And you know, like only last year, just still people consider that this ideal model from 96. There is Montenegro have tried all the models, separate ministry, vice prime minister. They tried all the schemes and all the methods, and still they are not sure, they are not able to identify the right model. There is no one recipe that will work for all. And we need to identify the necessary body, necessary unit, and not to engage all these changes, because when we change in the unit or agency, this means we are losing people. And as well, everybody was emphasizing about the lack of civil servants. So negotiation process is not only about civil servants. Not only civil servants have to be engaged. It should be very much inclusive process. It's not only about civil society. There are different cases, and there are cases when civil society engaged. In Montenegro, you won't be able to find experts that are not related to European integration, and they are members of at least some working group. But there are different processes. Some experts decided to quit the working group because they were used as an excuse to push some processes through negotiations. So we need to understand how this process have to be integrated. In many countries, we had professors and instructors from the universities, businessmen that were CEOs of some companies in Croatia, in fishery. The guy who was in charge of some company, and the net size was a very important issue, and he knew all the little details that were needed. And we need two categories of people. First, sectoral experts that are available in the ministries, but they are needed to develop our internal negotiations, to create this team in Ukraine and to agree about some position. And we need experts who will negotiate with Brussels. And these are people that are not only English-speaking people, but they speak the Brussels language. And the Brussels English is a special type of English, and they know how EU operates, and EU offers something, or European Commission offers something, how to interpret it in real life and how to explain it to those who engage in internal negotiations. I don't want to scare you that we need tens of thousands of people. No, that's not true. I think the myth about tens of thousands of people for negotiations, this myth is spread. I have no clue why it is done, but one of the versions is probably to create some separate ministry or whatever. But if we really analyze, so we need 20 people as a backbone of the team, and then about 100 experts. In Montenegro, they had 600 to 700, and they figured out it's too much. It's too hard to coordinate. They decided to have 300 to 400. I don't know how about the number that we need. Hleb have emphasized the financial issue, that nobody will work as volunteer, like pro bono, as in this coalition candidate check. But frankly speaking, my experience shows that whatever financial benefit will be paid, in case we won't have people who will consider it's a mission for the whole life for them, this should be young people, that they should have the mission. Ukraine as EU member. In Croatia, the average age of negotiation team was 27 years. Pretty young people. So pretty young people, and it's not ageism. It's not ageism. Definitely we need some experience, guys, definitely. But we should not be scared to engage very young people. They are not 100% experts in some subject matter, but as experience proves that you need 6 months for a person to get the bottom line of the issue. So that's very important. Who are going to be the people who will take part in the process? It's very important that the person should start from, should be there from the very beginning to the very end. Not politically allowed. That in Poland they were two main negotiators, and the second one was deputy main negotiator. And so that's why we need to be very serious about it. And this person should be the person with certain authority to make sure it can be pushed through the ministry or through the parliament here, person with the authority. That's very much important. In case we are losing negotiator, this means we are losing about 1 year of negotiations. This can happen. The longer the process, the more Northern Macedonia lost about 90%, only 2 persons from 96. And they started together with Croatia. And we need to understand it will be a long process, and heads of the working groups should not be politicized people, and we need these people. I just wanted to tell you what we can expect and what are the challenges, but all these issues can be solved, and we can do it, we can handle it. In case we will start, I believe, so every country that joined, they were not 100% prepared for negotiations, but they managed to join, and we can do it as well. Super. Thank you very much for the details in our negotiation process. And now I just wanted to give the floor to Ivan Naharnyak, Deputy CEO of the Office of European and Euro-Atlantic Integration. He'll join us online. Good afternoon. Do you copy? You hear me? Yeah? Excellent. First of all, just wanted to thank you for inviting me here to take part in the event, and I was listening very attentively to whatever been mentioned, and it's hard to disagree with you. What I just wanted to add to this, we need to understand the whole algorithm of negotiations. First of all, we expect that after EU recommendation with respect to opening negotiations, there will be period to develop negotiation framework, and European Commission will prepare it. And at the next session of European Council, in case dynamics will be proper, in some countries it took 2 to 3 months. In other countries, European Commission developed this kind of document about 5 months, and negotiations framework have to be approved, and the first session of government conference of the respective parties have to be represented, and the teams have to be introduced, announced, and negotiations framework have to be presented. That's basically the start of negotiations. So we need to understand when the European Council will adopt the political decision to start negotiations, and the first round of negotiations. Before that, it will take some time. And within this period of time, we are planning to prepare the government and government officials to negotiations. What I'm talking about? From the very beginning, when we submitted our application, then engaged in pretty quick special operation to respond to the survey, to the questionnaire, and then we engaged in advocating it in European Commission and self-screening that we were doing from February 23 and ended at the end of September. And we managed to understand whatever Alona Edmanchuk have mentioned before, that we won't be able to use only government people. Definitely we'll have to attract people from non-governmental sector, from NGOs, from think tanks, and from consulting companies. What I'm talking about here, from European Commission in February 23, we received the 28,000 legislative acts of EU, and about 3,000 EU acts have to be implemented here. And when we are looking at association agreement, about 615 legislative acts. So we are expecting not an easy time. And we will need to reach agreement with the EU Commission about technical issues and implementing certain directives, procedures, bylaws, whatever. And we have specifics in our economy as every candidate country, and we need to protect as well our interests to make sure that these type of reforms are not too much burden for us. But as well, when we are talking about fundamental clusters, there are 5 chapters, but 23 and 24, it's about rule of law and freedom and security. And in case we want progress with respect to rule of law, irrespective of the number of negotiation experts, our negotiations won't move forward. That's the whole methodology of EU expansion, approved already in 2020, and we have to work with the EU Commission. And we have to work about different aspects and to make sure that we are supporting good dynamics in these processes. And really, government pays a lot of attention to our institutional preparation and capacities. I am directly engaged in developing national program of adaptation of Ukrainian legislation to acquis communautaire, and it will be kind of framework document that will show how Ukraine will deal with these 3,000 legislative acts, including chapter 23, 24. And in this respect, we are going to engage these sectoral experts, attract people from private sector, and we'll have to develop position of Ukraine with respect to the timeline and conditions for implementing each particular directive. It won't be an easy task, and we will need, with the help of donors we'll need to think how we can engage in certain activity and how we can remunerate people for their engagement, because we'll need to take people from think tanks. And when we are talking about civil servants, we managed to launch project, just it's lingo capacity building. Our civil servants, they are studying 2 months, and these people will be engaged in negotiation process. And in addition, we can see lots of interests from specific countries to help us in this respect. And there are, in Estonia, for example, they have organized 6 trainings for our civil servants with respect to negotiation aspects. So our team is under development, and when we'll have the first intergovernmental meeting, we'll be ready to introduce this team of people that will deal not only with implementation of European legislative acts, but these people will negotiate and they will speak Brussels language. And we have lack of these people. Thank you, Ivan. We are very glad for you joining us, and we are thanking governmental office that you are responding to our initiatives. And now I just wanted to give the floor the tastiest part of this cuisine and Center of Political and Legal Reform, Oleksandr Sayenko. Thank you, Victoria. I'll try to be brief, not to take too much time from Your Excellency, Ambassador of the Netherlands. I'd like to thank you, Government of the Netherlands, people of Netherlands, for military support, military assistance, and humanitarian support. And we feel this support that you are helping us to. I was engaged in MH team and investigation team, and in Netherlands they know what is Russian aggression. I'm thanking you very much for all your support. And about the subject matter, coordination of European integration is extremely important, and it's part of public governance reform. If you look at the latest report in June, and we expect a new Sigma report next month, and we understand that success in European integration depends how effective and efficient our government machine will operate. And first, we are talking about institutional framework. And we understand, to make sure this is effective and efficient process, we need to develop the backbone and framework for we need to have team, including different institutions with the key roles, and upgrade in European Integration Office, more active from political standpoint, more influence with respect to coordinating it with the ministries. Government secretariat have to be reformed. In the ministry, we need to have directorates, to have some counterpart, to make sure that we have capacities ready to respond, not only to approve the law, but implement it into real life. Because I know that European Commission cares not only about the law, but how it works in practice. And this factor of transformation will affect the assessment of our progress. And when we are talking about this institution, actually, we have to deal with the process as well. We need not only civil servants, but we need people from NGOs, from business. But to attract these people, we need to have pretty obvious and public procedures to engage this. In case these people are not engaged by the government, in case they don't understand in the government why these or that decisions. So experts won't be beneficial for us. So to make sure that all the decisions are transparent, all the decisions have to be financially viable, and we need to analyze policies, we need to engage in strategic planning, we need to engage in a lot of routine and conservative issues without public consultations, without engaging society, without experts from different sectors, without analysis. The results of implementation are not going to be that efficient, and we will need people. We have lots of initiatives to train our personnel, and so we have different projects, but we need to solve the civil servant. You see, we can train 100,000 people. We can train people. People are joining civil servant, but after a couple of months, quitting the job, and we are losing all these people. And we have invested into these people a lot. This person is ready, they are not continuing to this work. And it's hard to motivate people with civil servant job, explaining why pay is like this and whatever. We need to look in a comprehensive way at training our specialists. Only local projects won't be able to solve this issue. We try to engage young people very much. And we had very effective and efficient project with the EU Commission. And with this support, we managed to pay higher pay. And we selected people with the participation of international recruiting companies. And so the whole process have to be very honest and transparent. And the whole selection process should be like this. And a lot of people believed in this, that they have to do something. They have capacity to change something. And in healthcare, in economical sector, agriculture, we have to stick to these people. People are the main resource, including civil servants. And the government actually is the employer that have to be competitive with the private sector. We should be like thinking that a bureaucrat is corruption person that will get bribes. So we need to look for arguments to make sure that the good candidates are joining civil servants' work. And I just wanted to end my speech with the following. We need to explain it more and more about our public, about reforming the civil servant group, the whole government. The whole discussion is let's have less pay and let's have less bureaucrats, and that's it. And business and public in general, they have to understand that effective governance will affect success of the country. So in the most successful country, the system of civil service is number one. So, and the rating, without effective and efficient public governance, there is no successful country. So we need to explain to our people, and we need to look for the support in this. And we need to get support from our international partners. We are trying to engage in a lot of anti-corruption activities, but we need to look for the balance, how to attract people, how to develop these people. And this means that a reform of civil service have to be part of the agenda of our international partners, to emphasize this issue for our government, to communicate with the public, with business about importance of this reform, and to become like partners about importance of the civil service reform. And I am pretty sure that long-term European integration process and success will depend how effective and efficient will be civil service apparatus. And we have to be conscious about this, that this coalition with international partners have to be the most successful. Thank you. Thank you very much, Alexander, for very important points. And now we have 13 minutes for Q&A.
I have a question about the political independence of Ukraine's anti-corruption organizations, NABU, SAP, and how that affects Ukraine's potential European integration. And I'd like to raise a specific example. A lot of people point to the arrest of Vsyvolod Knyazyev, the former head of the Ukrainian Supreme Court back in May, as a positive example of Ukraine really fighting to clean up corruption. What very few people note is that a couple of months after that case, the prosecutor who was involved, Oleksandr Ilkov, who was also involved in some other fairly high-profile cases, had his duties reduced and is now in Ternopil essentially doing traffic stops and petty theft. I'm curious how that kind of development potentially influences the prospects for Ukraine's European integration.
Я навіть дякую за запитання, перш за
Thank you very much for the question. I think we need to plan one more event paying attention to anti-corruption bodies. Alona, we are not dealing with anti-corruption issues, but the only thing I can mention is definitely it will affect because it's a situation, because this is a part of fundamentals, because chapter 23, 24 is the start of any negotiations. And they are opened up at the very beginning, and we end up with 23 and 24 chapter. After political decision that we expect about starting negotiations, maybe some additional recommendations will be to Ukraine that will be in particular about rule of law and as well anti-corruption activities. And I just wanted to say that I don't want these recommendations to be something like slowing down the negotiations, because we consider this type of issues that you have mentioned, this is much better to be solved when we start negotiations about fundamentals, especially chapter 23, 24. And this will be a better leverage than imagine or introduce 5 or 6 or 7 new recommendations, not to open up the negotiations. And our coalition candidate check, in case we'll have better leverage with respect to these issues after starting negotiations. Thank you. Thank you. Maybe others would like to add something. As well, just wanted to thank you for your question. We are not anti-corruption specialist people, because Ukrainian institutions are going, how independent they will be, Ukrainian institutions, and this will affect the negotiations. And our interaction with international partners are very much important. And the list of recommendations, there are recommendations from USA and from EU. And these requirements have to be coordinated. And the better Ukraine will accomplish the effective governance standards, we will have better success. And I agree with you that with the colleague that mentioned it should be an obstacle to open up. It will be a carrot for Ukraine to adopt negotiations as fast as possible, as we communicated with our Lithuanian partners that started this process much earlier. This type of requirements from EU and this carrot that country can get and the will motivate much more to adopt the necessary changes, because you understand, in case we have started this process much earlier, we will be much more successful. And unfortunately, corruption issue that and pro-Russian communication channels, they are very much emphasizing this issue. So we have to be very careful in our communication. And we really need to make sure what kind of progress Ukraine makes in this sphere. I just wanted to, on the way to this event, I was listening to the radio in the car, and there was a new survey, Khmelnytsky International Institute of Sociology, and very interesting results. 60% of Ukrainians consider that authorities are serious about fighting corruption. 1/3 thinks no, not serious. But what is interesting, in the western part of, if you are more to the east, they are not that confident about fighting corruption. This issue is always, actually, it's number 2 issue. At the beginning of war, it was not a type of priority issue, but now all the surveys show that this is number 2 issue after war that Ukrainians are concerned about, corruption. And that's a very serious requirement from the society. And our people are even more serious than the European Union from anti-corruption standpoint. And I think Ukrainian authorities won't have the possibility to get around it. They have to demonstrate the results, because our people are not tolerating corruption, especially during the war. People are having a very acute feeling to fight injustice, to fight for justice, and fighting corruption, and definitely to make Russia liable for all their crime. And I just want to say, Center of Political Reform, we have combating corruption activity, and our experts are very active in drafting and implementation of legislation, and that's why it looks to me, and I fully agree with the colleagues, attention to combating corruption should be the highest. And what can I say to European partners? Definitely you deal with civil society to find out more in detail about priorities. But in general terms, we have good dynamics. We won't be able to overcome corruption in one day. But after 2014, our dynamics is getting better. Ukrinform, Ivan Gusiakin, you have mentioned about this. But Martin Jäger, German ambassador, have mentioned that European integration, it's not a menu in the restaurant. It's not your choice, but you have to swallow everything. So the survey of Kyiv International Center, that 60% of Ukrainians should protect their rights and should not agree with all the EU requirements. Maybe you see here some manipulation possibility for these purposes. Do you have a question to concrete person or to general, to those who want to respond? Alexander, Alena. I can do it in case nobody is insisting. Yes, it's not a menu, but there are main courses, you know, fundamentals, rule of law, and key reforms, chapter 23-24. These are the most important. And with respect to society, how it will be responding to probably unpopular decisions. I think it's about communication of Ukrainian politicians, civil society, more broad society with respect to the need this or that. It's not EU joining Ukraine, but Ukraine wants to join EU. So we have to explain all this stuff. We have to explain what are the benefits from this process. I just wanted to warn Ukrainian politicians, just wanted to warn that all unpopular decisions should not be explained that this is because of pressure applied from Brussels. This should not be happening, because many politicians, in case they want to explain unpopular decisions, it's like we don't want, but Brussels is pushing us to the edge, and because of that, populist parties appeared and with anti-European slogans and causing disappointment in the society. But we need very much consensus, and it's very much important. And during the whole negotiation process, this is one of the key issues: consensus politically. And Montenegro, after 10 years of negotiations, and only 3 chapters have been taken care, and 70% of Montenegro population supports EU accession. There are just pro-European parties there in Montenegro. So explaining everything, and I hope that some unpopular decisions will have eventually positive impact when we are talking about well-being of Ukrainians, and Ukrainians will be able to understand that this is something that is very much needed. The only thing I just wanted to mention, some of the chapters, when we are talking about approximation of our legislation, allows us enough discretion for decision making. There are international standards, there are criteria, but Ukraine is having certain discretion in choosing the way of regulating this or that on the basis of historical issues, some experience. It's not a menu, but we can choose some directions to develop.
9 years. My parents are Ukrainian, and we want Ukraine to be part of the EU. Corruption, for me, is a very big problem at that time. I'm also a frontline medic, also a frontline instructor. Right? I've trained the Ukrainian army soldiers over that 9-year period as well. I've seen corruption kill people. Over the last year, me and my team have discovered a corruption schemes almost €500 million. We have evidence, we have witnesses, we have all the material for these schemes. 3 weeks I've tried to get the information to the Ukrainian government. I talked to Oleksandr Ilkov from NABU. Oh yes, we're interested in this. Still nothing. Tried to talk to Budanov and Skibitsky. Same thing. Yes, we'll have a meeting. Unfortunately, time's run out, and we're taking these cases to the ICC and the ICJ. I also have skills in criminology, criminal justice, and forensic science. I find corruption to be one of the biggest problems in this country, and it kills people because of it. And I brought a Dr. Glenn Collingwitz from Australia over here to help deal with it, and he is of the same opinion. And he is a very well-known, very well-respected international criminal law and prosecutor. I'm at a loss to explain how we can join the EU with these issues, with this corruption.
And can you you represent?
I represent Australian media as a freelancer. My name is Dmian Doroshenko.
Дякую за ваше запитання.
Thank you for your question. Really, corruption is really very much damaging to the society, and it's very damaging to our military armed forces. But what can I say? Ukraine is trying to engage in reforms and changes. But we have to say that we have some results in corruption. Just, for example, administrative services, they don't have any corruption in this sector. You don't need to pay bribes to get passport or whatever. And as well, we have much less corruption on administrative and political. And there are new anti-corruption institutions that are helping this. And decentralization reform also reduced level of corruption because substantial resources were submitted to the local authorities. And it's straightforward that the system, because from central bodies, there is much less interest political. So Ukraine is engaged in all possible steps to reduce it. But we are definitely very thankful to all journalists and all watchdogs in this process because it helps to identify and even sometimes to prevent misuse of funds. But at the same time, we have to assess some positive changes. And when EU is adopting decision about opening negotiations, and before that, definitely law enforcement bodies have to work. But here we can't assess the level of evidence. Is it enough or not enough? And there is temporary investigative commission in parliament that are reviewing this type of cases, and you can appeal to them and they will respond accordingly. They will send query to gather additional information, and they will identify if there is potential to investigate criminal case. And at the very end, I just wanted to say that in Ukraine, we have political responsibility for corruption. And there is a case with the Minister of Defense when potential corruption scandals arise, and Minister of Defense was fired because he was unable to explain everything. But anyway, thank you for your question. I just wanted to add, I don't want to have a feeling that in December Ukraine is becoming EU member. No, because sometimes we can hear in media that Ukraine is becoming like EU member or NATO member, Vilnius or whatever. We are talking about political decision about opening negotiations. We don't know how many years it will take. But anyway, believe me, civil society of Ukraine and EU, we are not interested, and European Union is not interested to accept Ukraine at this level of combating corruption and rule of law. This is very important process for us, and from the standpoint of minimizing corruption cases. But at the same time, we need to understand that Ukraine shouldn't be sometimes explained as the most corrupt country, as sometimes Western media is doing. We have to admit as well that there are some accomplishments in combating corruption after 2014. So that's a very important process. Definitely we'll use it to combat corruption. And that's why we have these chapters, fundamental chapters that are very much needed and very much beneficial for our development, because joining EU accession, that's the possibility for Ukraine to save us from ourselves, from some inertia, some sometimes conscious decision or inclination with respect to corruption or undermining rule of law or whatever. And we are interested, and this is a process. Yes, we'll use it to combat corruption. I just wanted to thank everybody. We already have spent additional minutes, and I just wanted to thank you very much, those who joined us online, and thank you very much our speakers, to the ANTS Network, Center of Political and Legal Reform, and special thanks to Your Excellency, Ambassador of Netherlands. Your support is very much important to us, and we hope to cooperate with you in the future. Thank you very much. Bye.